Dr. Mobius, thank you again.
It's a pleasure.
I wanted to ask you why you're so much more overweight on Brazil than, say, Mexico. What is the difference that you see in Mexico, and what does Mexico need to do to get to the level of Brazil?
Well, first of all, Brazil is a lot larger. The market capitalization is larger, the size of companies is larger in total. So it's natural that we would have more in Brazil, all things being equal. Of course, they're not equal. The difference is that in Brazil, a lot of the major companies that here in Mexico are state-controlled are listed. A good example is in Brazil, Petrobras. Here, Pemex is not listed, though that's a huge part of the economy that we can get access to that we can't get access here. So that's one difference. The other difference is that Mexico is tied very, very closely to the U.S. and to Canada to a lesser extent. Brazil has got a more diversified economy. They're shipping to Asia, they're shipping to Europe, they're importing from all over the world. So it's a much different scenario. I'm not saying it's good or bad, because in some cases Mexico will do better than Brazil, but that's a very different environment.
Sure. You mentioned Pemex. Would you buy the stock if you could? If they did an IPO, would you buy it?
It depends on labor reform.
Okay. What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, if they did go public and there was a change in labor practices, so they would become more efficient,
sure.
Less heavily weighted in the labor side, I think it would be a very good company.
Sure. Equity capital markets on the new issues side, very much not as active here in Mexico as it is in Brazil. Do you look at new offers here in Mexico when they come along? Would you like to see more of them?
We definitely look at every single IPO and secondary issue as well, and we'd like to see more. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we'd like to see more state-owned entities coming to the market.
Sure. Were you looking at anything in particular on this visit?
On this visit, it was mainly companies that we already own and some companies that we're looking at. Mm-hmm. One IPO, but that's about it.
Sure. What about the telecom sector? Did you have the opportunity to meet with folks at América Móvil? Did you have the opportunity to talk to Carlos Slim?
No, I didn't meet with Carlos this time, but we met with his representatives at América Móvil and also Telmex. Mm-hmm. And as you know, we've been a long holder of those companies.
Sure.
We still feel pretty comfortable, particularly with América Móvil.
Sure. And the security situation here. How has that impacted your decision-making in terms of exposure in Mexico thus far? And what would sort of, let's say, push it to a new level?
It hasn't really affected us very much. Okay. Now, I know the body count has gone up significantly. That's not necessarily a bad sign. It may be a good sign in the sense that the government is now being more aggressive and therefore more encounters.
Sure.
So I would say, on balance, it hasn't really impacted. You must remember, what we do is we go to the companies, we ask them, is the security situation something that affects you? And we haven't heard anything from any of these companies saying that, God, our business is down because of this, or we're restricted because of that.
Sure. But you, as an investor coming from outside Mexico, what are you looking for that you think would sort of change the scenario? Are there any possible game changers when you look at the situation, security situation? What would be an indicator that it's begun to affect business?
It's not so much the security situation, but what will affect the overall environment will be a loosening of government regulation, a reform in government structures, so that the small and medium enterprises can prosper and move forward. Reform in labor rules and regulations which make labor more flexible.
Sure.
All of these things will impact the economy. And let's face it, at the end of the day, the reason why you have a law and order situation is because of economic growth.
Sure.
The economic growth here is not fast enough to satisfy the growth in the population and the expectations that people have. I mean, you can't have a situation where across the border you have people with an income of $14,000, $15,000, whatever a year, and people here with a much lower income. So Mexico has got to be growing at 6%, 7%, 8%. not at 4 or 5.
Okay.
And the only way you can do that is by some real reform in the government.
Okay. Let's go to Egypt real quickly. Does the continued closure of the Egyptian bourse change your call on that country's equities? Are you worried about what might happen when they reopen?
No, because they have a plan for reopening,
okay.
and they're going to be having limits. I think it's 10%. If the market goes down more than 10, they're a circuit breaker. So I think it's going to be a more orderly process going forward. And if you look at the offshore market, because some of these stocks are offshore, it hasn't been that disastrous actually.
Sure.
So we don't expect any really big problems in terms of price declines. If there are, of course, it'll be an opportunity.
Sure. And then going to Eastern Europe now real quickly, Hungarian equities, have you seen any effect from the takeover of the pension funds? Does that affect you at all?
Yes, there has been some impact of that, and we have to watch the developments very carefully, okay. Because that impacts the market, what the pension funds do in the market.
Sure.
Generally speaking, Hungary and Poland in particular are benefiting from what's happening in Germany, because they supply a lot of the parts and other services for Germany.
Right.
With a booming German export machine, these countries are beginning to be on the mend.
Right.
Now, in Hungary, there are lots of government problems, as you well know, in terms of how they treat listed companies that are partially owned or controlled by the government. So that's a challenge that they have to look at going forward.
Okay. And I hate to jump around geographically,
That's
but
right.
one more leap. Dubai. What is the sell-off in Dubai all about? They haven't seen any real problems on the ground as we've seen elsewhere in the region. Are you concerned about Dubai? What is your outlook going forward?
Well, Dubai is very, very close to Iran, and of course, a lot of Iranians are investing in Dubai or have invested in Dubai. So it's really a meeting place. And also don't forget the impact of Saudi Arabia.
Sure.
So I'm sure a lot of people are concerned, gosh, if something happens in Saudi Arabia, if Iran becomes more dominant in the region, what impact that will have on Dubai. So it's a general uncertainty.
Sure.
But Dubai has been on the mend. The property sector has been gradually on the mend. Still lots of supply already and coming on, because many of the projects they couldn't stop.
Sure.
So it's going to take a pretty long while, I'd say 1 or 2 years, before you can see a real upturn in the property side. But then don't forget, 45 minutes to an hour drive, you have Abu Dhabi, which is very, very rich and can support economic development very nicely.
Sure.
And that benefits Dubai.
Sure. Let me bring it back home to Mexico for the
Right.
last question, since we're here in Mexico City. I know that you go around and personally visit with a lot of companies. It's important for you to meet the executives there, see what sort of personalities are behind these operations. There's a lot of family-owned companies here that are fairly large in size but have yet to go public. Any in particular that you think is well primed to go to the market, or that you'd like to see go public?
I would like to see them all go public. We'd like to see more of these family-owned companies go public. There's a long list. I won't mention any names, but I would say that that would be very, very good for the market and for the families, because many of the patriarchs are getting old, and many of the siblings, the sons and their siblings, are not really interested in the business.
Sure.
So, bringing it into the public domain would be very positive.
Is that a possible recipe for success, for getting out of this sort of 3 to 5% growth rut that Mexico is in, and getting it into the next stage that you talked about earlier?
I think it'll help. If you have more of these companies listed and growing at a faster rate and becoming more aggressive, then it would have an impact. But more important is now government reform.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.